My name is Peter Politis, and I'm the Executive Director of Dallas Center for Photography. DCP is a 501c3 nonprofit, and it's a place where we believe in the power of photography. That phrase is usually used to refer to the power of a particular image. In our case, we think that photography, at whatever level you interact with it, can change lives. Whether you spend time taking pictures or just enjoying looking at them, photographs have a way of bridging gaps between people of different nationalities, status, gender, education, and just about every other human qualifier. At DCP, we teach classes and workshops, and when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, we hold exhibits in our really quite wonderful gallery, and we host other live events. We also host regular juried competitions, and we have one open right now that actually kind of relates to the topic. The competition is called The Human Portrait. And we've already gotten some really surprising and beautiful and inspiring entries. One of the JFK related photos that Tom will show tonight would fit that category perfectly. If you'd like to submit images and a chance at the $1,000 in prize money, you'll find all the information on our website. And that money was put up through the generosity of Dallas Center, for competitive cameras in Dallas, not Dallas Center for Photography, our sponsor. And any of you who are in Dallas know about them, the wonderful camera store and a supporter of us and the arts. Right next to that on our website, you'll see that we have a unique fundraiser coming up soon. It's called Off the Wall. Tickets are $125. And during an interactive and entertaining 90-minute session, we call names randomly. When your name is called, you get any piece of art that is left. There are 45 pieces, 45 tickets. And so everyone who holds a ticket goes home with a framed fine art piece. And two of them are a pair of images that Tom is actually going to show tonight. Just a technical note, tonight's presentation is in the Zoom webinar format. So no cameras, no microphones on your end. You just get to relax. We'll control what comes up on your screen. And if you have a question for Tom, we're hoping to have some time at the end for a Q&A. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. That's where you can enter the question, and we'll take some questions and ask Tom about them later on. So tonight, I am very happy to be able to present Dr. Tom McConnell. Tom got in touch with DCP back in 2015, looking for someone to work with him on camera skills and to become more proficient at the digital side of processing and cataloging. And it was clear from the first time I met Tom that this was a man on a mission to basically learn everything. And he and I hit it off pretty well because he's creative and he's a smart aleck. So we kind of had that in common. And one day, after looking at a lot of beautiful travel photos from really exotic locations around the world, he mentioned that he had taken some pictures in 1963 around the JFK funeral. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And then he showed me the pictures and I just about fell over. And once I heard the story about the pictures, I was even more intrigued. So over a period of time, that gets us to tonight, where Tom has a chance to tell you his story. So Tom, please go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Okay, Peter, thank you. And thanks everybody for showing up. This is Tom McConnell. I'm glad to have you here. We wouldn't be here if I didn't like to take pictures. And the reason I like to take pictures is I like the stories that come with them. There's no such thing as a picture without a story. So let's start off with one of my favorite of all photographs. This picture was taken in 1925 by a professional photographer and paid for by my mother's father, seated here, Walter Ditto, D-I-T-T-O. It's a very unusual last name. It derives from the French Detaux, D-E-T-A-U-X, meaning toll taker or tax collector. And we can trace our ancestry back to Abraham Detaux, who came to these shores before 1600 and was on the tax rolls in Baltimore at that time with his adult children. So here's one branch of the Ditto family from which I spring. You'll see here Walter sitting on the front porch with his family, and the house he built himself with his own hands. It's on a farm up near Bowie, of course, now long since gone. Pictured with him is his second wife, Myrtle, who is the mother of Paul, the last of 8 children, the only boy, as you might imagine. And arrayed here are the girls, the 7 Ditto sisters, whose mother is now dead. Their mother, Lily, married Walter when she was 15. She gave him, and herself, of course, 7 girls in 11 years, and then died at age 30 of pellagra. Pellagra is a vitamin deficiency that was endemic in the southern U.S. Back in the early part of the 20th century, and it springs from up in people who mainly have their main caloric intake is from corn instead of wheat. Corn contains very little niacin or vitamin B3, and pellagra is a vitamin deficiency that not only killed the girl's mother, but Myrtle a few years later as well. How the children survived all that is still a mystery, but those are the facts. And the only grandmother I really ever knew was his 3rd wife. So here, let me turn this over, by the way, if I may, here to a little bit of a, laser pointer. These are the 7 Ditto's girls. This is my mother here, and I'll come to the rest of them in a moment. It still amazes me that Walter Ditto, poor as they were, sprang to pay a professional photographer to take this picture. I'm going to read you I've written thousands of words about this picture, and I'm going to read you some of them. The picture is a granite scene chiseled with horizontal and vertical lines, spare and severe. The Dittos stand ramrod straight, as upright as their uncompromising morality, symbols of a generation, hardworking, obedient, and plain-spoken. They look straight at us, inscrutable and devoid of affectation, no smiles or frowns. I'm wondering if Grant Wood, who painted American Gothic 5 years later, had the Ditto family in mind when he painted this iconic picture. But back to the picture itself. The Dittos project a hard edge, plainness, severity, and uniformity, unbending but bound by strict convention. No jewelry save for simple necklaces on the 2 oldest. You'll see here the 2 oldest, the only 2 with jewelry. Lipstick only on the 3 oldest here. And all of their hair is short because one of the girls trimmed it all in the same way. They all have bangs. I guess maybe she used a bowl and cut around the edges. I don't know. Only the 3 youngest have dresses above the knee, and they all wear black socks and sturdy flat black shoes. Only the 3 young, let's see, Helen, number 4, right, my mother's, the 4th of the breed, is my mother, her older sister. Helen's hairdo and distinctly different dress. Her hair is different, her dress is different, and this prefigured her later ways as determinedly different. She's the only one that didn't marry. She was outspoken, full of strongly held and ill-formed opinions, my mother liked to say. And of interest that it is that, to me at least, that the 3 in white, my mother, Ruth, her younger sister, and Helen, lived together. My mother, a widow, Ruth, a divorcee, and my aunt, unmarried, lived together for the last few decades of their lives. This is my mom at age 39, our housekeeper Blanche at age 23. This picture is more important than you might might otherwise know. My mom took a lot of pictures, although it was just in the background. It's kind of like oxygen in the air. She never talked about it. She just took pictures. Blanche, it turns out, was the archivist. She kept mother's pictures in a grocery sack, and they piled up over the years. We had a long relationship. I have pictures of Blanche with my grandchildren. And she ultimately gave me all those pictures she had saved. It was a miracle. Here I am. This picture is courtesy of my best friend forever, Joe Kennedy from Sulphur Springs. Hey, Joe, I hope you're out there. This is Troop 67 of the Boy Scouts of America, Sulphur Springs. I was born here in Dallas at Old Parkland Hospital, the one a few blocks from where I am right now at Maple in Oak Lawn. But I was raised in Sulphur Springs where this accent got tattooed into my brain. This is my first camera, the only camera I can remember, but I don't remember much about it. I don't even remember what the make was. So if any of you, here's a closer look. If anybody in the audience has any idea what kind of camera this is, I'd sure welcome hearing about it. Because Peter and I have tried, and we're hoping someone will have a better idea than we do. After Boy Scout camp, I took this camera with me to the Boy Scout Jamboree in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Here I am with an artillery, this is me here with someone whom I don't remember, an artillery piece at Valley Forge. You can see we went to New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. The 4 pictures outlined in yellow here are places I visited in 1950, little realizing that in 13 years I would be back under entirely different circumstances. I took pictures of the White House. This is of the South Portico, because you can see the Truman balcony right there. Most pictures of the White House now are taken from the other side, because the street from which this picture is taken is now closed, and Pennsylvania Avenue is on the other side. This is the Tomb of the Unknowns, and this is the Capitol. Ultimately, I'd be stationed at the funeral right up in this little spot right here. I did get to visit the Pentagon for medical purposes. I visited actually the Pentagon Clinic, where I would ultimately be stationed as medical officer of the day on the fateful day that Kennedy was assassinated. But I don't have a picture of the Pentagon, so this is not my picture. But I was there for treatment of diarrhea, and I was on the other end. I was treating diarrhea by the time I got to be a doctor in the Pentagon. So the photography bug has lasted through our family for a long time. This is a picture of my oldest child, Ann, who is this generation's photographer. And let's turn a little bit now to the timeline we're going to take you through here. First of all, medical school from 58 to 62 here at UT Southwestern. Then an internship year at the University of Mississippi in Jackson, Mississippi. And this was arguably the most important year of my life. It changed me in many ways. Then I was in the Army for 2 years, the first few months in the Pentagon. The next time at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, after I got tired of the Pentagon. Then I came back to Dallas for 4 years to do a pathology residency at Parkland and UT Southwestern. This time I spent in Mississippi was, I've put a lot of those stories into a memoir I published about 8 or 9 years ago. You can still find it on Amazon. It's got these stories and many others. I'll come back to a few of these here in just a second. My time there was more or less framed by James Meredith's forced entry into Ole Miss. The federal government, the FBI, the CIA, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, I guess, were required to get old James Meredith enrolled. He's still alive and lives in Jackson, Mississippi. The other bookend, I guess, to my experience, you could say, was the assassination of Medgar Evers. Most people don't know much about Medgar Evers these days, but he was a very charismatic man and was the field secretary for the NAACP, and assassinated on his front porch on June the 12th, 1963. I did not have any medical other interaction with either of these figures, important figures, but nevertheless, it was a marker, if you will, of the conditions going on in Mississippi. At the time, to have a Texas license plate on the back of your car was to invite people bumping you at the traffic light. It was it's hard to describe. I got involved in a case and went to trial in Vicksburg, a Black woman on trial in front of an all-white, all-male jury. It was something out of a movie. Anyway, it was a very important year in my life. After that, I was completely broke, had a brand new baby girl, Ann. I was being paid $125 a month. And the $525 a month that a captain in the U.S. Army made sounded really good to me, so I joined the Army. So we were told to report to the Pentagon sometime, I can't remember the date, but sometime in early September. So Marianne and I left in our little Volkswagen and drove to Washington, D.C. And when we got there, this is what was going on. We got there on August the 28th, 1963. We did not attend the rally, of course. It was hard to find a place to stay, but ultimately we found a little motel and checked in. And I can remember very, very well, it was the first time I'd ever seen a black newscaster on television. So here we are, stationed in the Pentagon. I did not like wearing this stuffy outfit. It felt to me like I was going to work in a suit, and I guess you could say I was. I didn't like being a medic in the Pentagon dispensary, even though it accounts for one of the more interesting events of my life. I wanted out. I had to ride the bus to work. I didn't like riding the bus. By the time it got to my stop, I was a strap hanger all the way. And so I asked, later on, you'll see that I asked my commanding officer how to get out of there, and he told me how to do it. So this is the first picture I have of, I have others. This is not the first picture. I have too many pictures to show. It'd take all night. But this is Emperor JFK, Jackie, and some State Department official, I guess. And here's Haile Selassie. He is not much appreciated now by the current generation, I guess you could say. But he is one of the most important figures of the 20th century, particularly the early history of the 20th century. A lot of other pictures to show you, but just a few. This is JFK, Jackie, Dean Rusk, Secretary of State, and Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia. For the younger persons in the audience, Yugoslavia is just a name that probably doesn't draw much attention or notice, but he was a communist dictator that glued together this ethnic mishmash over here: Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Kosovo, so on and so forth, just across the Adriatic Sea from Italy. Marianne and I traveled up and down the Dalmatian coast a few times. Anyway, I have a lot of other pictures to show you, but we just don't have time. Let's go next. The last time I saw Kennedy alive was on Veterans Day, November the 11th, 1963, at the Arlington National Cemetery, the Tomb of the Unknowns. You can see him here with the Joint Chiefs of Staff coming up. The wreath will be placed here. The dignitaries will all be on these toe markers here. And that's just a little snapshot. I didn't take a close-up picture of him because it was such a somber and important day and occasion. I didn't want to seem almost sacrilegious to be taking a picture, so I didn't take any close-ups. Then on the fateful Friday, November the 22nd, 1963, this is the scene from Arlington, Virginia. Marianne and Ann, our little Volkswagen, our little apartment, and me in that awful business suit. I was medical officer of the day, all right on that day, but it sounds like it's a big deal. It was not. I was the guy. There were no women in the clinic at that time. Actually, in my medical school class, only 3 of 100 were women. Thankfully, that has changed. But I didn't like wearing the suit. I didn't like riding the bus and so on and so forth. But I was there as an MOD, which is basically the guy who takes care of anything out of the ordinary, unscheduled. Well, and that's the biggest of all unscheduled things happened, as you might imagine. This is a picture of the Kennedys driving through Dealey Plaza just seconds before he is shot. And I can't get off of my mind how happy the two of them look. And of course, there's Senator Connolly here, Governor Connolly in the front seat. So here I am the next day, ready in my dress blues, ready to go to the White House. I did not take my camera to the White House because I was stretching things a little bit by taking it where I had done already. So I decided to leave it home and not take it to the White House. This is the first floor of the White House, we were brought in from the northwest gate of motorcycle outriders in a military police car. We got out, lots of saluting and so on and so forth, went inside to the entrance hall. And I knew my duty station was to be over here in the east room, just outside the green room door. The dignitaries mainly came in through the north portico, and some from the south portico got themselves together in the green room, and then went into the east room where the casket was displayed. Out here in the cross hall, there were tables with newspapers from the Lincoln funeral, which was held in the east room. And the pictures, the drawings basically showed how the White House was draped with black crepe for the Lincoln funeral. So this is the interior of the east room, of the green room. I was standing about right here. You can see a little bit of the east room through this door. So the dignitaries came in here and then into the east room. This is the scene as I saw it, with people coming in from the side, going by the casket, and then out to the left to the cross hall. Although the kneelers had been removed by the time the crowd got there. So after, and every important person it seemed on the planet came through, it was quite an experience. After everyone had gone, I concluded that maybe I would go down to the West Wing. The White House was basically empty. Nobody was there. Lyndon Johnson had not occupied the White House lest he appeared too eager. Of course, the Kennedys were not there. So I was in my uniform. I had my orders, a copy in my pocket. So went down past the Rose Garden, down the West Colony, went in this door, and there were some heavy curtains on this window. And I thought, oh gosh, the CIA is going to be in the Secret Service, going to jump out and grab me and ask me, what are you doing here? But nobody was there. So I went around the corner, went down this way. I was headed to the Oval Office. I could see a little bit of the blue carpet. You can see there's a sight line, goes right down this way. I could see a little bit of the famous Kennedy blue carpet. But I got to about this point right here before this door, and I thought, you know, my mother wouldn't approve of this. This is just too much voyeurism at a time of a national tragedy. So I didn't stop being a voyeur, but I guess I became a second-class voyeur, because I went into the cabinet room and sat down in one of these chairs. I doubt it's the same chair. It was a long time ago. But you could also see down into the Oval Office from this side of the cabinet room. But I sat there and wondered what it would be like to go to a cabinet meeting, like in the Bay of Pigs crisis earlier, which was about as scared as I've ever been by a public event. So after that, nobody there. I chickened out, didn't go steal an ashtray from the Oval Office, went upstairs, looked around the green room, the cross hall, and I thought, you know, I could actually go upstairs to the second floor. And because nobody's probably up there, I could lie down on a bed in the Lincoln bedroom. Well, I went up to the first landing, then to the second landing, finally got to the third landing. Of course, it curls around and goes up to the left again. So I stuck my head around the corner and said, hello, is anybody home? Blah, blah, blah. Nobody answered. And so, but I chickened out again. My mother wouldn't approve. This is just bad behavior. So I retreated, went back over here and had sandwiches and coffee served in the state dining room by a butler who had first come to the White House with Herbert Hoover. Now, the next day, the body is taken to lie in state in the Capitol. I'm up here. I'm right up here. This is the camera, NBC News camera. I'm up here. I can't prove it because I can't, other than circumstantially, because I've never found a picture of myself in this position. But if anybody out there can find one, I'd appreciate it. I haven't looked exhaustively, but I'd like to see it if you can find one. You can see here the casket, the caisson, the riderless horse with the boots turned backward. And it's just a symbolism of the absent leader. And then you can see Jackie and John Jr. and Carolyn over here. I'll have a picture similar to that to show you from another perspective here in a minute. Nancy Dickerson was in her first year as newscaster for NBC, and I was standing up there with her, and I learned later on that she had dated Kennedy when he was a senator. My accent gave me away, and she asked me where I was from, and I had to say Dallas, and she then began to question me about what kind of people lived in Dallas that would shoot the president of the United States. I didn't have any answer for that, of course. And so I just stood aside, and she put her headphones back on. And so we were there, and then in a moment, maybe 20 minutes after our first interchange, she clasped her hands to her headphones and closed her eyes and looked down, and like she was in the utmost concentration. And I wondered what was going on. Well, this is what was going on. She had just learned that from the newscast that Kennedy's assassin had been assassinated himself by another man, Jack Ruby, no less in the basement of the Dallas City Jail. When she told me that, I just thought the world was coming unglued. After all, remember, no one knew if this was a Russian plot, a Cuban plot. Who knows? It was just the world. It was crazy. Okay, so this is the view I had. Here comes the casket, the caisson, the riderless horse, some limos coming behind. Then coming up the steps, this is Dean Rusk, Secretary of State. I don't know who this gentleman is. Then the Kennedys start to approach. You can see them the kids beginning to take a step forward here. John Jr., Carolyn, and Jackie, and you can see other members of the family coming up behind. Here comes Robert McNamara, who is Secretary of Defense, and I don't know who this gentleman is. This is Earl Warren, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And here comes the casket carried by representatives of the various military services. And you can see Jackie and Carolyn and John Jr. in the background. And here are the family closer as they come up. This, of course, is John Jr., Carolyn, and Jackie. This is Bobby, Teddy and his wife, Joan, Kennedy's sister, Patricia, with her husband, British actor Peter Lawford. This is LBJ and Lady Bird, all coming up the steps. After a certain period of time, they came out. I managed to, this is one of my favorite photographs, to catch them just stepping off. And I have to emphasize, I've got a lot of other pictures, but there's only so many I can show. I'm still looking for the pictures that this guy took, or this guy took, or this guy. This guy looks like a policeman with his white helmet taking his pictures. And so I didn't feel so bad being a doctor there and taking my pictures. And maybe this guy works for the CIA or the Russians. I have no idea. I just haven't seen the pictures. The next day, we're out at Arlington National Cemetery. It's a nice view here across the bridge in the Potomac to the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and the Capitol here. Then here comes the caisson, the casket. The family are coming behind. Religious figures here, Cardinal Cushing in red, other religious figures here. And here come the family and the casket being carried up to the grave site. You can see Cardinal Cushing is in red right in here, and other religious dignitaries. And the family, the Joint Chiefs of Staff follow here, as you can see. This is one of my most favorite photographs. I ask you to study the crowd for just a minute and see if you can see something that jumps out at you. Well, the thing that jumps out at me is Charles de Gaulle. He's had a really high opinion of himself, as we all know, those of us who study history some. And it would surprise me not at all that he thought that he could command a special sunbeam to shine down on him in this crowd, and it appears to do so. So here he is, Charles de Gaulle. There's Haile Selassie. I have not identified other heads of state in the first row. After the crowd moved in, I had to hold my camera over my head to get this picture. It's just as the eternal flame had been lighted and the dignitaries gathered around, and the casket is about to be lowered into the grave, and the eternal flame has been lighted. Then as the guests departed down the same little walkway as they came, I moved over to be closer, just in case somebody needed CPR. Actually, I wanted to be close enough to take a picture. So here I am. This is my shadow. You can see me with both hands. I was taking these pictures with a Konica. That's all I can remember. It was a viewfinder camera, but I got a picture of the event, and the event has the story, even if the picture's not very good. This is Prince Philip. I don't know who the others are there. This is Charles de Gaulle. He was a really impressive guy. The French back in the day, and I don't know whether they still do or not, call him 2 metres. This means 2 meters because he's 6'8", and I'm sure he stretches 7 feet from the top of his kepi to the bottom of the heels of his boots, but he was really an impressive figure. And here's LBJ and Lady Bird. Then this is the last, and maybe in a lifetime of taking pictures, this may be the one that means the most to me. It has a story, and I'd ask you, I'm going to be silent here for just a minute, and ask that you just take in what you see and think about what it says, if you would. We'll take just a few seconds. Well, this is what I have a habit of writing rather formal captions for some photographs, and this is what I wrote about this one. Day is done, silence reigns, the pomp of life stilled. The tide of mourners has ebbed, return to the comforts of home. Those remaining look to themselves. Echoing the strength of larger purpose, the sturdy columns of Arlington House rise above feeble graveside pickets. The nation endures. 4 days earlier, he bestrode the world. He was 46 years old. So sad. So after discharge from the Army, I went back to Parkland and took up my pathology residency. And of course, I knew virtually everybody on the Parkland end of things, from the professors to the staff that took care of him. The first doctor to see him was Jim Carrico, who's a personal friend and later chairman of the surgery department. And Jim was the first doctor to see him, was with him the entire 25 minutes before he was pronounced dead, I think is about the span of time. And Jim alluded to the fact that the Kennedy's personal physician, Admiral Berkeley, gave him a syringe full of steroids to give to the president. So with that bit of background information and me learning to do autopsies and still being attached to the Kennedy events by the fact that I autopsied, my turn came up when Oswald's housekeeper was to be autopsied. Actually, the newspapers reported her as his landlady. That's not true. She was his housekeeper. Anyway, I'm here to tell you that she was not poisoned by the CIA or the Russians. She died of heart disease and thyroid disease. So I get, with all this going on, I develop a strong interest in the JFK autopsy. So let's say a few words about the investigation of his death by autopsy. Remember that we didn't know what was going on. There was a time of terrible uncertainty. I don't know if this is a fact, but a naval intelligence officer, one that I knew back in the Pentagon, told me that he worked way down in the basement of the bowels of the organization. and that the Strategic Air Command, which is now defunct, had launched their bombers and opened the missile silos in the Dakotas. And so just in case, you know, it was the Russians, and we need to be ready. Or it could have been Castro, because the Cuban Missile Crisis had occurred about a year before. And by the way, if you want to read about that, there's no more riveting book than Robert Kennedy's book called 13 Days in October. So anyway, you know that the body was taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital for autopsy. This was over the objections of Earl Rose, who was the Dallas County medical examiner. But it was inevitable that it had to happen, that the body got taken away, because Lyndon Johnson would not leave the widow Kennedy behind, and Mrs. Kennedy would not leave Dallas without her husband's body. The net of it is that the Secret Service came in and more or less hijacked the body to be taken for autopsy at Bethesda Naval Medical Center. But there's much confusion up there, because the body had been, and the autopsy pathologists were separated from the most valuable kinds of information, that from the clinical team that took care, from law enforcement and other witnesses. So there was much confusion. Conspiracy theories began to flourish, equal at least to the ones that are now extant. And so Lyndon Johnson formed the Warren Commission, headed by the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, to investigate the matter, and they issued their report in September of 1964, 10 months after the event. The next year I got there to Parkland, by then I was really interested in the autopsy. So I got a copy of the Warren Commission autopsy report. And this is page 5. And the irony here is wonderful. One of the first things, let me say this, that this is not your standard autopsy report. Up here is a richly ironical misuse of language. This should be entitled a pathology report. Pathological means sick or flawed, and some people get a guffaw out of that, because this is a flawed autopsy for sure, intentionally, I guess you could say. The proper word is pathology here. Anyway, if you look down, the heart and lungs get full description, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at the abdominal cavity, there are at least a dozen, depending on how you count, named organs in the abdominal cavity. The appendix is mentioned only because it's absent. Nothing mentioned about the adrenals, the glands, or the kidneys, whatever. So this makes me think, abdominal findings omitting. What's going on here? And then I think about the steroid syringe that Dr. Carrico got. Then I think about Kennedy's face and skin. This is him at age 22. This is him at age 42. Notice that his face is round, much more rounder than it used to be. And that's what we call it, and when it's more full-blown, a Cushingoid face. It comes from taking steroids. You'll notice that his tan is also kind of strikingly uniform. Usually the eyes will be a little bit, they don't get so much sunlight. It's hard for a tan to get in there, but this tan that he has is due to the fact that his adrenal glands have been destroyed. He has what we call adrenal failure, or Addison's disease, and that's one of the clinical clues of Addison's disease. So he's got two clinical clues right here in this picture. Well, it turns out, so this was my thought, does he have Addison's disease or adrenal failure? Well, it turns out he did, and it's now a known fact. The first few cases were reported by Dr. Thomas Addison to the Royal Society of Medicine in 1849. There were 11 cases altogether, all due to tuberculose destruction of the adrenal glands. Nowadays, tuberculosis accounts for only about 10% of cases. About 85% are due to an autoimmune reaction. Most of the audience will know that that's where the immune system turns against the body in one way or another. And when it turns against the adrenals, it just destroys them, and the person is left with a need every day to have replacement steroids because it's a fatal disease without steroid replacement, like diabetes is fatal without insulin. This topic came up in the campaign in 1960. Robert, when Kennedy was asked about it, and he said JFK does not now, nor has he ever had an ailment described classically as Addison's disease. Well, that's true, but not the full truth. Kennedy's diseased adrenal glands were due to something else, not tuberculosis. So this is technically correct, but misleading. In 1962, when he was 45, Kennedy had to have extra doses of steroids and salt because salt, the body loses a lot of salt in Addison's disease, and so on and so forth. So in 1992, the autopsy pathologist and others present confirmed that he did in fact have Addison's disease due to destruction of his adrenal glands. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through just real quick, a few photographs here. I used to do some scuba diving. This is a photograph of scuba divers from the early 1970s, my friend Harry Mason. You'll notice he is wearing a white long sleeve shirt, gardener's gloves. You can't see the blue jeans, but that's what we dove in because wetsuits. No, we didn't have any wetsuits, but this did keep the coral from scraping the hide off. So I like to take pictures, but the underwater cameras were lousy, and so I gave it up because I couldn't take pictures. I always wanted to see a Bengal tiger in the wild, so I went to India. Sure enough, this is a Bengal tiger in the jungle, in the wild, not in a park, not in a zoo. It was thrilling to see. But while I was there were a lot of things to take pictures of. India is a photographer's paradise. I couldn't resist this picture of two bovines here at a vegetarian restaurant. As I said, India is just full of opportunity. This is at the Sikh temple in Amritsar, where they, on a busy holiday season, they can serve 250,000 people, but daily they serve about free food to about 50,000. This is from the Western Desert out near the Pakistani border. This is we went to see the World Heritage Site there at Jaisalmer, and we went to a village opium ceremony. I call this the opium wives. They had gotten together the opium for the guys, and the village chief, here he was ready to preside, and I snapped this picture of him. I don't know what he was looking at, but it's a nice picture, and I'm glad to have it to tell it. It's got a nice story with it. This is just a pretty picture. Sometimes you go somewhere to look at things, and when you get there, like the Taj Mahal, you take a picture of the Taj Mahal. Well, this is the Bibi Kanim Mosque in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. I always wanted to go out there because it's on the old Silk Road, leading from Asia into the Middle East and on to Europe. And it's really a nice picture, I think, and it reminds me of a good time. This one, I'm giving Peter Polides credit for this. We were on a cruise up the Hudson River at Albany to see the fall foliage. And I was standing on the shore cursing the fog. And I remember Peter saying to me one time, if the weather turns bad, turn it to your advantage. Well, I looked across the Hudson and the sun was coming up behind this scrap metal yard. You can see a backhoe or something here. And I got this, I think, really nice little photograph of when the weather was bad. I'd always wanted to see polar bears. I love the outdoors. I've seen and taken pictures of lots of different kinds of wildlife. This is from the Svalbard archipelago, which is a Norwegian possession. Just put your finger on the North Pole and look around and you'll see the Svalbard archipelago nearby. But this is the picture that I like the best. This is one of the wildest oceans on the planet at a dead calm. The crew said they'd never seen anything like it. So I got my little pocket camera out. It was midnight, and I snapped this picture. There's no land in sight, just clouds. And it's, as I said, it's at 80, look it up. It's 81 degrees north, 17 degrees east was the approximate coordinates. You don't have to go to the other end of the earth to see beautiful wildlife. This is taken in the Texas Panhandle a few years ago. I took a float trip down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon once, and as a week-long trip, I had 3 patients on this trip. The first was a woman in another raft who had an acute anxiety reaction. And the second was one of 2 patients I had on a 2.5 mile hike up to Beaver Falls along Beaver Creek. Beautiful, beautiful wild grape, broadleaf trees, beaver dams and whatnot. And this young woman right here was one of my patients. The other was a deputy sheriff from another raft who was drunk and dehydrated in a 2.5 hour walk back to the main river. But the principal patient was this young woman, and we took a time to sit down, take a rest at the end of our hike, and she sat down on a rattlesnake. It's a long story. I don't have time for it, but it was certainly an adventure. Peter wanted me to show you a picture or two of a few other things. This is a solar eclipse in Nashville a few years ago. This is the diamond moment. And this is a transit of Venus. It was taken on June the 6th, 2012, the last transit of Venus until the year 2117. There's only 2 planets closer to closer to Earth, closer to the sun than Earth, and it's Mercury and Venus. Mercury, when it crosses the face of the sun, is tiny and hard to see. Venus is closer to us, further from the sun, travels a slower orbit, and these are sunspots. So let's see, we've got just a couple of seconds. By the way, the next transit of of Mercury, you'll have a chance at that because it comes in 2032, but the next transit of Venus does not occur until the year 2117, so you've missed out on that one. I'm going to quit after just something really brief. One of the things that interests me most is mathematics and nature. And the Fibonacci sequence, which is a sequence of numbers where the one number is the sum of the previous 2. It goes on for infinity. It produces an infinitely long string of digits, but it's very powerful in biology and nature. This is a Fibonacci spiral, pineapple seed pods from palms, pine cones. The other thing I want to mention is fractals. Fractals are self-similar patterns at any scale. The type of branching of a tree trunk is pretty much similar to the branching of the limbs, which in turn is pretty much similar to the twigs branching. These are various forms of fractals in nature. This is Lake Nasser behind the Aswan High Dam at the border of the southern border of Egypt and Sudan. This is a dry lake bed or a mud pile, wherever you are. It's full of fractals. Even the foam in your bathtub or the foam in your beer is a fractal organization of bubbles. This is a fractal expression in lightning. The blood vessels of your eye and indeed all around your body are fractal displays. This is a real lung. The cast thereof, you can see how the bronchial tubes carry out a fractal pattern. Fractals are everywhere, from the fire in your flame in your fireplace to just an ordinary shot like this. The distribution of the wavelets and streams is fractal here. Cloud borders are fractal. Of course, there's fractals in the trees and so on and so forth. And with that, Peter, it's up to you.
Hey. All right. Thank you very, very much. I wanted to jump back in and actually comment on a couple of Tom's pictures. And I don't see we have many questions. I think we just have one comment and one guess on the camera. But I wanted to go back to a couple of his a couple of his images, and I'm going to do it like this. When he was talking about the polar bear image, if I Google polar bear on ice, which is exactly what I did here, I come up with thousands and thousands of pictures of a polar bear on ice. Tom's picture was a fine picture, but there are many, many other ones like it. And I'm going to completely agree with him, because when I Google Arctic Ocean calm, none of these, and I scrolled through pages of these, none of these get even close to the immersiveness of this picture. And this is one of the shots we actually have in the fundraiser. I was just astonished when I saw this image. Then I want to go back and talk about the JFK picture for just a second. So I did a little research, and I found four similar images to the one that Tom showed us. This is a half a step before the picture that Tom took. When they swung their feet out for the next step, that's when Tom clicked his shutter. It's a nice shot. The expressions are not as good. This is probably one full step after Tom's picture. Keep in mind, these are shot by professional photographers with press passes, most likely. Another couple of steps down, I'm sure these may all be different photographers, and then flash at everything at the bottom. So all good photographs. None of them are as good as this one. And when Tom was talking about the moment and the legs here, there is so much going on in the two youngest Kennedys stepping off of a ledge. There's so much going on in the iconic silhouette of the widow. Did he do all that on purpose? No. But my point is that there are professionals around here getting paid to take these pictures. And Tom, who may or may not have supposed to have been having a camera with him, with a more amateur camera, clicks this picture. And I think it's the finest image in color that really encapsulates the somberness of the event. And the fact that Bobby is sort of semi-hidden in the column behind her makes that even more poignant. So I just wanted to point out that photography is a process. It's about just having a camera and taking pictures. And so that's why I was so stunned when I saw this. And I got to rescan this slide for Tom and do some corrections to it, some dust, color corrections and everything. And it does look nice as a black and white image. That looks really nice as a black and white image. But in this case, the color is a really big, I think a really big part of the story. So I'm going to, we do have some questions here. Let me see. So one question, was it frowned upon to be in the military and take these up close pictures during such a somber day? This would be more on the,
Can you hear me okay, Peter?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it was frowned upon. It was surprisingly casual. I mean, I just took my camera because I could. I don't know if there were rules against it. My orders were really just quite general. It was astonishingly casual, if you will. I can't imagine somebody getting away with that nowadays.
Okay. Yeah, the access, when you talked about wandering around the White House and kind of like, hey, is anybody here? Can you even imagine?
Oh, it would never happen nowadays.
Yeah.
It never.
So we have another question. Is there a way that we could see the rest of your JFK funeral pictures and other 1960s Washington, D.C. photos? Let me jump in before I let you answer that. Tom has a really informative website with an actually very clever title. It's his initials. He is the third. So it's THMIII.com. And on there are some of his stories, a link to his book, and there are some more images. There's something really neat happening right now, I think about to happen with his pictures of JFK. Tom, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I'm going to gift them to the Sixth Floor Museum. I've been interviewed by them and gave it a little talk down there back in 2015 or something like that. What else do we done? Have I missed addressing something?
No, that's it. I think just the fact that they're going to find a home, because Tom's had these in a slide sheet, well kept, but the sixth floor museum, for those of you who are not in Dallas, it is the museum of the JFK assassination. And they are the archivists. And so I think they're really thrilled to get Tom's pictures. And I would imagine maybe this interview will become, maybe this presentation will become part of their collection.
Well, I guess we'll wait to see.
Yeah. We also had a question. Somebody really commented on the opium wives, which I thought was also interesting. And will there be an opportunity to rewatch this video? We will put this up on our YouTube channel at some point. Got to just give it a little time, but we will put it up on the Dallas Center for Photography.
Peter, if I may interrupt there just a little bit, that website I'm modifying. So when they go to thmii.com, the first page says it's kind of a mess, but if you persist,
yes,
you can find some stuff.
I was just on it about an hour ago. It's got a couple of broken links in it. Don't worry, yeah. You're not getting hacked, but the content is there. Yeah, he's redoing it. Actually, a friend of mine on the West Coast, Jonathan, hello, guessed that the camera that we showed from Tom's youth was an Argus. That's exactly what I thought because of the off-center lens. It looked like one of the C series. I showed Tom the actual cameras themselves, and he didn't think that it was an Argus because the Arguses, even the simple ones, tended to have a lot of buttons on them. And he said that that was a simpler camera. At first I thought it was a vertical camera. But he said, no, it was a standard portrait.
Peter, this is probably heresy in this audience, but you know, I've never paid much attention to the camera. It's just all something I always had along, you know, and my mother the same way. And nowadays, of course, think about the opportunity people have. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket.
Yes. And I love that you said that, actually. There was a question, does Dr. McConnell still live in Dallas? Yes, he does. If I yelled loud enough, he might be able to hear me. He lives near downtown. Yeah. Here's a question that will get us going here. So, Tom, Dr. McConnell, after reviewing the autopsy report, are you convinced that Oswald was the sole assassin? And is there any room for any of the proposed conspiracy theories, in your opinion?
Well, you know, what is truth? Truth is someone's opinion about a fact. And I believe that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. I could go into some detail. I was raised with high-powered rifles and guns. I don't want to go there too much, but I actually for a while thought maybe I could figure out a way to explain the pristine bullet by another theory, so on and so forth. You have to remember that every instant in life is some combination of unlikely circumstances. Every instant. You couldn't reproduce in a million years if you tried. And so there's always going to be uncertainty about everything. But for me, Lee Harvey Oswald did it. That's the end of it.
I will say that Tom has a really fascinating and well thought out solution for the magic bullet, which we don't have time to get into tonight. But I don't know if you'll write that up at some point or if there's already a story about it, but it's well,
it turns out, Peter, to be as unlikely as some of the others, but it is an alternative explanation that might work. I mean, who knows? I'm not spent my life obsessing over this. It's just entertaining and interesting because I like to read history.
So we have a really interesting question here. Do you have a current project you're working on, and what is the story you are wanting to tell?
Oh gosh. Well, there's stories, okay? Lots of stories that are not in my my memoir, but I want to do a second memoir and put some of the other stories in there that I spent a lot of time working on. So yes, I have more to do than I can do, fortunately.
Okay. And then the last question, because we're right at, boy, I got to tell you, you are good at keeping time. I am so impressed.
I've been doing this for a while before a class of medical students.
Yeah. So we had a question, more of a comment. I'm sure that many of us would like to hear Dr. McConnell speak again and would also like to hear about more talks and webinars from DCP. I think I know who wrote that. I would like to have Dr. McConnell back. When we get back to the gallery, having these pictures printed and exhibited and having Dr. McConnell there to talk about them, I think would be really great. Not to repeat the whole talk, but just to be there and interact with people, and show these images, print them and present them really well. I think they actually deserve.
Yeah, the time will come, because we're going to get a grip on COVID with the vaccines. It'll maybe another year, but we'll be there.
Yeah, when Tom says that, I get so much more calmed down. Tom, actually, in the early days, I was asking him some questions about the whole COVID thing, and his comment was, everybody just needs to take a breath. And but I presume he meant and not exhale on the other person. Yeah. So yeah. I'd like to say a gigantic thank you for first of all being there in 1963 and then finding us and being able to do this talk. If y'all, those of you who are not already affiliated with DCP, if you like this programming and you want to support more, you know what I'm going to say. We are a 501c3. You can join as a member. Members get to attend all of these kinds of events for free. And we also have donation links online. This has been a tough time for everybody, and especially fine arts nonprofits. We're kind of bouncing along, and having people as generous as Tom to help us out with things like this has been a big plus.
I'm really pleased to do this, Peter, because I really didn't understand anything about photography as art. I took painting lessons when I was a kid. I painted and all that sort of thing, but I never thought about photography as art. It was always documentation. And I have to say that I really didn't understand what photography was about until I took that Lightroom class from you, and then that got me going.
Okay, thank you. One question that did pop up is, can you join DCP if you're from not in Dallas? Absolutely. We actually have, I'm looking at the attendee list. We have people right now from Colorado, California, Arkansas. I'm not sure if we have anybody overseas right now, but yes. You absolutely can join. And I would strongly encourage those of you who have a penchant for taking pictures to consider entering our juried competition. This human portrait, it's a good time for the topic. We also have an Instagram contest going on right now on our Instagram site called Feast. You can guess what that theme's all about. So I'm just going to say thank you, and I'm going to have Becca shut us down. So thank you very much, Tom, and thank you all for showing up tonight.
Amen to that, Peter, and thank you.
Good night.
Night.